Thank you. So, first part of this talk is even before I start, I would like to know or do some table setting. Um, right now, today, as of March 2026, when you hear the term AI, what model, system, tool, or app comes to your mind? So I would love to hear from the room and also from online. Um, yeah, any volunteers? Great. So the point I was trying to make, or am trying to make, is that um, if you're not a computer scientist and you are sitting in 2026, most people think of AI as a chatbot. Um, and when I say most people, I'm also excluding a lot of people um, that I'm getting to in a second. So in today's talk, this talk is divided into four parts. First is who is AI for? Like who are we even building these systems for? Um, what that choice of system costs you, you meaning the person or humanity in general, sorry, individually, and then what it costs all of us, so humanity in general. And finally, can we build a different type of AI, and are people building that? So when I say that if you're not a computer scientist or if you're not involved in this deep world of constantly thinking about and talking about AI, or if we're not talking about people who have access to these systems, there is a massive subgroup of people in the world who do not use AI as we currently envision it, meaning chatbots. So I'm thinking about people like my mom. So she is a 55-year-old Indian woman in Kolkata, India. She does not have an information knowledge production type of job. She sustains a household with her hands and her time. She cooks, she cleans. She does not use a chatbot. So when I asked her in preparation for this talk, or even like while writing the paper, what she knows about AI, so I asked her the same question. So she first paused, and then she started laughing when I said that I use it for code and whatnot. She was like, "Oh, all I've heard is that AI does bad things." So for her, as a non-English speaker, as a homemaker sitting in India, she had only heard bad things. Like I saw the news, people are using AI to make NCII content, to make fake news, misinformation. Um, there's a study from Al Jazeera which says 86% of Indians now worry that deepfakes will undermine future elections. There was an election in, I believe, 2024, the last national election, and dead famous politicians' images were used as deepfakes by existing political parties to show ads. So that's the kind of exposure that people who are not interacting with chatbots know about AI. So, I asked her, like, I use Cloud Code, I use these or that systems, ChatGPT, whatnot, for writing, for doing research, for writing code. So I asked her, like, do you have any use for a chatbot? If I gave you Cloud Code, what would you do with it? She again, like, she straight up, like, we were on a video call, we do FaceTime every morning. She's pointed at her task that she was doing, and she was like, will will it make all of this faster? So that caused me to like pause and start thinking a bit more deeply about who we are not building AI for. What 2+ billion people in the world? Um, I actually brought up this point in Paris as well on stage. Jan was there. Like my mom has nobody's building AI that can help my mom, and several different people from I don't know. There were people from the UN, there were people from nonprofits, there were people from India who came up to me after the talk and said that this is a problem. Nobody's people building ChatGPT are not thinking about the use cases outside of the Silicon Valley and like say global North bubble. Um, I think it speaks to what this room just alluded to and what people online are alluding to, that chat interfaces are the foremost paradigm in current AI usage. ChatGPT was the fastest app to reach 100 million users. It did that in 2 months. Compare that to like Google Translate, which took 78 months, Instagram, which took 30 months to reach that many users, which is crazy. Like that, it has probably been, excuse me, the fastest technology to overtake everything else in the world from my vantage point. That being said, I have also started to observe that every AI lab, when you think about AI lab, you think about different main companies like, I don't know, American and Chinese companies and Mistral and whatnot. They're all building the exact same thing. Um, it is good that I'm in an academic institute because I can ask you guys directly this question. Like most of you are PhD students or postdocs, I imagine, or master students. Most people working in machine learning and computer science want to end up working in one of these tech companies that are building AI systems, and your vast and lived experiences all get washed out, and you're all forced to build chatbots, which is really sad if you think about it. Like 5 years ago, you could have built, I don't know, biotechnology systems with your expertise. But because these labs have the most resources and the highest salaries, people ultimately get sucked into those companies. And then they'll build chatbots. So somebody from XAI recently quit the company like very soon after joining. And he said the same thing. All AI labs are building the exact same thing and it's boring. And I think that beyond boring, it's also just objectively harmful for everybody to start building the same kind of thing. And then it gives people less agency than we think it does. So the point I'm trying to make in this talk is I'm saying that nobody asked for chatbots. The industry picked one interface, like ChatGPT was straight up an experiment. Like it was a commercially available interface for InstructGPT that had already come out about 1.5 years before ChatGPT came out. It got super popular, and so everybody else started standardizing around it instead of thinking creatively and differently. And my point is it really serving the kind of uses that AI can potentially solve? Um, there are a lot of problems or harms with scaling up AI systems, LLMs and beyond. The point that I'm also making or trying to provocate in this room is that using those systems within chat interfaces is not only sometimes causing, but also taking existing harms and accelerating them further. So in my view, this is what happens when you accelerate everything using chatbots. First, when you are always chatting with a system that is supposed to do some other mechanical task, you sort of start having a lowering of safeguards and of judgment. And we will get into what that means. But for instance, if an ATM receipt says thank you in the end, it makes you feel better. It makes you trust that system more than if it did not have any welcoming, inviting message. So conversation sort of has this unique way of engaging people into the basically giving systems personalities. So when that lowers judgment, it lowers barriers. So nobody now needs to think of using a specialized system. Sorry, when you use specialized systems, you now don't need to think of that system as a specialist thing that you need to have any expertise for. So because these chatbots are so inviting via conversation, people are now chatting with them as they would with their friend, with their companion. And that means everybody is now writing code in English, or everybody is now doing medical analysis in English, because this companion is always available, always their friend, and it is super intelligent and is always ready to help. And that lowered barrier of usage then produces this massive scale that we're talking about. So we're talking about 100 million users in 2 months. Um, so scale at this stage means that the kind of harms that people were talking about during, say, the stochastic parrots paper, I don't know how thousands of years ago at this point, which is crazy, um, it has now become structural. Everybody who uses a chatbot has a part to play in sort of exacerbating these issues much faster than any previous technologies. So what does that sort of scaling, hyperscaling, chatbots being in everything? I was literally seeing this protein folding system by OpenBio, and the creator, who is from, I think, Triple IT Bomb, whatever. The creator decided to put a chatbot in there as well. And I actually asked him on Twitter, like, why did you put a chatbot in there? Did somebody ask for it? Is it really more specific? Like, can you specify protein folding commands more clearly using a chatbot? And he was like, I actually hadn't thought about that at all. I think everybody's using chatbots, so I decided to add that in as well because why not? And so I sent him this paper, so I'll let you know what he says. But what does that eventually cost you? Does that give people more agency or does it take away from it? So I guess like let me pause here and ask people in the room this question. Do you think like what do you think of um, advanced AI being presented to you as a chatbot? Does it empower you more or does it take away agency from you? Like what's your initial thinking? Okay. So what do I mean when I mean agency? So what I call agency, or at least my definition for this working paper, is the capacity to act with understanding, intention, and accountability, meaning that not only do you use a system, but you have the option to choose the outcomes from that system, to contest the outcomes if you're impacted by it, and to repair harms. So that sort of breaks into two halves versus individual agency. So when I, as a person, interact with a chatbot, are the options given to me real or illusory? So do I have choice? Deskilling was brought up in the discussion right now. So am I thinking or am I offloading my cognitive process? What agency do I have in that? Similarly, care. If I'm using my chatbot as a companion, am I supported or am I or simulated? Like is the concept of care being simulated and the chatbot doesn't actually care about me because it does not have humanity? Um, in terms of collective agency, I'm thinking about labor. Who loses their livelihood because of this massive scaling of the chatbot paradigm? Democracy. Who is controlling the infrastructure that becomes this thing that underpins all development environment? So, for instance, think about GitHub, for instance. It is now very strongly paired with Copilot, which is controlled by Microsoft, and it uses by default, I think, ChatGPT models, and then you can also specify and ask it to use Claude and whatnot. But who is controlling that thing that is now supporting so much open work? And finally, environment. Who bears the cost of environmental harms? Since we're at Weizenbaum Institute, I will take a second to talk about Dr. Weizenbaum. In 1966, Weizenbaum made this chatbot called ELIZA. Clearly, LLMs weren't a thing back then. We're talking about 1966. It was a bunch of if-else statements in the back. And people who were interacting with ELIZA were actually told that this is like the decision flow of the system that you're interacting with. And yet, what happened is people felt like Eliza was great at providing them therapy. Weizenbaum's own assistant asked him to please leave the room because she was like having a very intense personal discussion with Eliza. People felt comforted, supported, even though they were told at the beginning of the experiment that it was a bunch of if-else statements. And if you see the responses, like oh, can you think of a specific example? Well, my boyfriend made me come here. So Eliza responds, is it important to you that your boyfriend made you come here? Clearly, like the system was not actually performing any cognition. It was repeating the questions back to the user. And yet people felt seen, comforted. They felt like they had a companion. So I may give an example earlier of another Eliza effect, which is when you go to an ATM, you pull out cash, and the receipt at the end says thank you with a smiley. That makes people feel more comfortable using the system than something that doesn't. Um, so Weizenbaum actually was quite concerned. He said this in 1996 that extremely short exposures to a relatively simple computer program could induce powerful delusional thinking in quite normal people. Some of the people he did the experiment on were at MIT and were also, computer scientist students themselves. Um, the claim that I'm making from learning from what half a century ago is that dialogue activates social instincts that bypass critical judgment. And by judgment, I also mean cognition. He called it alarming. Right now, 60 years later, we are deploying this phenomenon, but at scale by integrating chatbots everywhere. Um, so how does that interface with agency? Chatbots feel like the most powerful AI tools ever built because they appear to offer unlimited questions, confident answers, infinite retry. There is no expertise required to use one. The user barrier is very low. It's always there for you. Like unlike your friend who you trauma dump on, they don't need to take breaks. You can keep talking to this chatbot. Um, but as you just mentioned, chatbots actually provide narrow solution spaces disguised as an infinite choice. So feeling in control, feeling babied, feeling like you are talking to somebody very powerful that serves your purpose is actually not the same as being in control. Because me interacting with ChatGPT goes far beyond, in terms of control, goes far beyond what I feel is happening. And it takes a lot of different shapes, including also who has control over the infrastructure. So let's look at your point. I said that we would get to narrow solution spaces. There was an experiment done by Zhang et al. The paper is called Creativity and the Artificial Hive Mind. So they asked a bunch of different chatbots or LLMs to give a metaphor about time. 1,250 prompts were given to 25 models. All models clustered around two concepts. Either some of them said, well, most of them said time is a river. In these ways, time is a river, time flowing endlessly, blah, blah, blah. Or the other said time is a weaver, threading moments into tapestry. So you actually don't get a lot of variety in chatbots, even if you're switching out the system, meaning that the sort of philosophical and cognitive space that you're interacting with is actually quite limited. For a bit more detail, these were the clusters that the different chatbots formed. As you can once again see, like they looked at providers between, different providers, different model sizes. And yeah, they were all either saying words like weaver, sculptor, or flowing river. So even though you feel like you're with this extremely powerful tool that you're interacting with, you actually are in a very narrow solution space, and you will never know what you don't know because you're always using a tool that has limited creativity to begin with. So ask ChatGPT if coffee is good for you. To Jan's point, it just comes up with the answer, and the research is not immediately shown. You can see the chain of prompt, and sometimes you can see the links, but from an interface point of view, it invites you to not look at those. So like if I'm asking my friend, if I'm asking my husband a question and you respond this to me, I will not like then say cite your sources. Like that seems hostile and combative. So to Weizenbaum's point, when something is replying back to you in a full sentence in a friendly manner, because of our social training, we are not invited to scrutinize that answer. And that is sort of the point I'm trying to make, is that it feels like you're talking to an intelligent agent, which is always there to help you, but it never cites its sources. So if there is a hallucination, you're not immediately primed to detect it. We are getting to the point about deskilling, which was also brought up at the top of this section. There are many, well, there's a growing body of work now. These are all 2025 studies that are showing that deskilling is slowly but surely happening. So critical thinking, frequent AI tool correlates with measurable declines in critical thinking ability. I have a Kai workshop paper also from last year with my collaborator Anjali from UT Austin, where we also say that people are losing their metacognitive skills. Basically, when you learn something, you don't just think about the problem, but you also think about your thoughts that lead to the problem. So that second layer is completely missing because of using AI, because you look at somebody else's thought process and you just accept it en masse. It's causing problems in medical expertise. So endoscopists who regularly use AI assistants showed reduced accuracy when they were not given that tool and when they were independently asked. It has cognitive debt. So people are now doing EEG studies. There's like really cool stuff coming out when people are actually studying brain function. I am additionally contending, or I guess trying to die on that hill, that it is also a user interface problem. So people have used tools in the past that actually measurably help their life. So people moved from looking at the North Star to use GPS. People moved from using the abacus to use calculators. But then the way that chatbots additionally invite you to trust it actually ends up impacting nearly every form of knowledge work. And that I'm slightly concerned about, because like you don't have the same kind of dependability and also interpretability provided with previous tools that people have depended on to do work. So to my mom's point, who independently came up with her, can this make this faster? There's this very popular tweet by author Joanna, I will not try to pronounce the last name, I'll probably get it wrong. But she tweeted, you know what the biggest problem with pushing all things AI is? I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do the art and writing, not the reverse. Um, so most of the labor that structures people's lives is physical, time-bound, and embodied. If you're using all of your companies and your labs resources to train better LLMs to do more chatbot work, you're not working on these problems. And in fact, you're probably taking away from the intellectual joy people get from doing cool, artistic, creative things. I find it concerning that, like, we as a society decided to attack, or sorry, to automate things that give people intellectual pleasure before like the physical stuff, which I think most people find really not fun to do. The question then becomes, why did that happen? Who decided this? Why are major companies deciding to automate knowledge work? Well, let's ask the companies themselves. OpenAI has their charter, wherein they have not defined, mind you, but redefined. So when they first started OpenAI and ChatGPT became popular, the way they defined AGI was something that helps humanity. Like it was much more EA, whatnot. Um, 2 years ago, they redefined AGI to mean highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. So cleaning the floor, washing dishes, doing dishes, cooking food is not economically valuable. You can have a laundry service for much cheaper than, I don't know, Claude Max per month. So obviously, like having right now we're in a society where having a software engineering job pays more than doing dishes. So if that is the goal from which your company starts, obviously those are the kinds of labor that will be automated and not things that people do on a day-to-day basis or people like my mom. So it is a development choice. Um, the concern also for me then is, how does that impact people who are much below in the supply chain of producing AI? So it is starting to have weird outcomes for people who had nothing to do, like didn't even choose to work with AI in the first place. So even if my mom wants to use AI, she doesn't have the option, but there are certain groups of people who don't want to use AI and they're being told that they have to. So it also takes away from the agency or the choice of not using AI. So one example of this is tomato.ai, which is advertised as a model that reduces or flattens your accent to sound more American or British. It is being served to companies that outsource call centers, usually with people in India, in the Philippines, in Latin America. And so it's a choice by American companies to force people to use these types of AI, and that sort of exacerbates problems like racism and just generally like bias. So I also have mentioned that AI companions make you feel heard. There is increasing concerns that this causes people to sort of trauma dump on AI systems or chatbots much more than they would do with usual humans because they don't come with the sort of social fabric that prevents further harm exacerbation. So because an online AI assistant is always there for you, always listening to you, you then sort of, you meaning people have sort of, because of sycophancy and whatnot, kept talking to these models, and sometimes that has led to dire consequences. Um, my concern also is that the constant personification of models and those models then saying things like, I'm here to help, actually converts care from a relational practice, from like, usually if you talk to a therapist or if you talk to your friend, it involves responsibility, reciprocity, and the possibility of harm repair. Chatbot-mediated care offers a constant responsiveness without obligation, and then it seems to offer something that seems like empathy, but without the same kind of consequence. So effectively, care, the really the human connection that we all depend on, sort of gets reframed as a consumable service. You can like pay for more tokens to get more care. without like the sort of associated things that happens when you try depend on another human for help. And who is responsible for providing that help in the first place? What kind of help is being provided? Chatbot-mediated therapy is starting to get banned in many places, including certain states in the US. So I'm curious to see how this space evolves. And unfortunately, that has happened because of incidents like this. So Character.ai is one company out of many that sort of provides AI companions as a service. A child or like a 14-year-old teenager using companion.ai created a companion that was role-playing the role of Daenerys Targaryen with him. These things came out in the court documents. He was interacting with that agent or the system, and then eventually killed himself. When you build a system that optimizes for engagement, that constantly wants you to talk to it so that you keep paying for subscription, this is unfortunately a thing that does happen. So making a user interface that is constantly inviting you to interact with it without consequences is, I think, a user interface choice. That it is a choice. You could have built systems differently. So when a chatbot causes these kinds of harms, who is responsible? Is it the system? There is no legal agency. Chatbots are not a person. There is no legal personhood. Is it the user? If you use ChatGPT or you use Anthropic's Claude, if you read the terms of service, and there are really good papers written on this, some by Kevin Kleiman, a dear friend from Stanford, now at Google. Acceptable use policies are written in such clever ways that all of the harm burdens are placed on the end user. So if you do something bad based on advice from a chatbot, you're responsible. That's what the terms of service tell you. Similarly, the company always tries to wash its hands. There was another incident involving ChatGPT with a person, Adam Rain, a teenager in New York. And OpenAI is now fighting them in court. And some of the arguments are saying that the child was provided with phone numbers or whatnot several times, but he sort of overrode those instructions anyway. That was heavy. Please take a second to recover from that. But after that, I would like to talk also about what this kind of chatbot-related scaling up and everybody using chatbot costs all of us. All of us meaning beyond my personal interaction with chatbots, what is it doing to the world in general? The entry points in labor are vanishing. So there's a bunch of work that is now starting to look at the labor impact practices of chatbots. A lot of work done in this area in the past have reframed this as intellectual property work. And I'm here to tell you that IP is not just the only tool that will help labor market, because work by Luther AI and other groups have shown that it is possible to train a very competitive language model using only public domain data, taxpayer-funded public domain data, and that does not solve these problems of the labor market. So we as a society seem to not have made any plans for what happens when entry points to professional careers start vanishing. Jobs for entry-level associate law firms, entry-level engineers, like the kind of jobs that you could get as a bachelor in computer science, those are vanishing. People only hire for senior roles now, and Anthropic put out an ad recently saying that they're hiring their last ever software engineer. And like there's a disclaimer under the job saying this role might not exist after 12 months. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I do know that people don't have the option of this not happening to them because they don't, for the most part, don't have control over the tools that are being made. Previous automation required custom software, but right now that entry bar is very low. The chatbots only require prompts. So if you are a deployer in a company, like you're sort of introducing a new system to your workflow, you can just describe a task in plain language and get usable output within minutes. So there is further work like Klarna, for instance, its chatbot handled work equivalent to 700 full-time agents. So that's some measure of job loss. Line Chat advertises its software as once you hire a Line Chat agent, you will never have to hire again. Before this talk, Harsha and I were talking about how AI agents in phone calls are problematic and just don't work that well. And yet these services are being served mainstream. Some more data on job displacement. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if you see carefully what kind of jobs are being replaced, you'll see a pattern, which is even within the economic class, higher socioeconomic class, the people who are being replaced are at the lower level. And then there are a class of people who are not even thought about. These people, the most affected people, actually have the least power to shape these systems because they don't get a say in what big companies do. I would like to talk a little bit about environmental impacts. Because of these systems that are constantly on and constantly invite you to work with them, to sort of become over reliant on them, people are now using these things to do very basic things, like things that would be one Google search away. People are using chatbots for math. When you ask a massive LLM to do math, this is what happens. There are cool interactive systems made by Sasha Luciani, my coworker at Hugging Face, which actually shows per prompt how much energy and water is being used. It's actually quite alarming how people feel comfortable using like a Claude Max, Ultimate, High, Pro, Massive chatbot to do extremely minimal work. Like there is no recognition of the idea that you don't need specialized or you don't need a massive general purpose system to do really mundane basic tasks. So the communities that were mentioned in the previous slide are the ones bearing the cost of AI infrastructure, but they're rarely the ones benefiting from this. So AI is optimized for knowledge workers, but not for people who are doing manual work. Humanoid robots are very, very early right now. The most work coming out of that is coming out of China. Humanoid robots that fold laundry right now, I think there was one shown at CES this year, cost $20,000. Chatbots cost nothing. So this kind of output asymmetry is very much a design choice. And that design choice, that development choice ends up forcing certain classes of people out of being benefited by AI. Using a chatbot costs pennies per query, but building them doesn't. So choosing to construct massive manufacturing systems for lines of GPU in your country, as opposed to building assembly lines, is also a choice. Like it is a national policy choice for a country like China to have a massive robot part producing factory in Hangzhou, right next to Unitree's development systems. There was a piece, one second. There was a piece written by I'm forgetting the name, but there was a piece written after the Unitree stuff came out saying that it isn't a lack of talent between America and the US that causes the disparity. It is like when you work in robotics, things break and you need new parts really quickly to do the other experiments. That takes several weeks in Europe and in the US because these parts are shipped from China. But if you're working in Unitree in Hangzhou, you just walk next door and pick up a part and it takes like less than an hour. So those things are national policy choices. So that's also one point I would like to make, which is AI, you can make a very powerful AI model. It does not need to talk to you to be powerful. So the reason why I asked at the top of this talk, what do you think of when you think about AI is because there used to be a lot of different forms of AI before everything became a chatbot. AlphaFold has actually, or the creators of AlphaFold have won a Nobel Prize, lest we forget, 2 years ago. AlphaFold is not a chatbot, and yet it is AI. We don't talk about science models, we don't talk about molecular models in the same space as we talk about massively scaled up transformer models, and I think that is a problem. There's a lot of cool work being done in AI for science. We have Hugging Science as an initiative ourselves, which is trying to boost some of this work and these data sets. The problem with everything being a chatbot is that language models are not necessarily specialized to handle some kinds of data sets that are generally useful for doing AI-enabled work. So you cannot use the BP tokenizer or whatever to like absorb genomics, proteomics, multiomics model data sets to begin with. So essentially, those data sets are not tokenized properly, and therefore it's a garbage in, garbage out problem. There was a study that came out of, I believe, Harvard at ICML last year, wherein they fine-tuned a language model to predict planetary paths around the sun. And then when they queried that same model to ask if it had also additionally learned the Newtonian gravitational paths, they did not. Like the direction of the arrows is all over the place. So clearly a transformer is not as generalizable for physics as it is for language. So we are not building other alternative systems, and that is a problem. Um, I think it is slowly changing. Hopefully, I'm seeing some glimmers of hope. Domain scientists are now working with AI people to build different types of architecture. So something like called cell transformer has come out of UW, or sorry, UCSF and UW, I believe. Really cool stuff. I'm interested to see what comes out of this. Um, you could also, even if you are stuck within the chatbot interface, actually do more, which people are not doing, to support cognition. So this paper by Anjali, who I mentioned earlier, uses something called metacognitive prompting. So even within the chat interface, you could have a system to remind you to question the answers given by the models so that you continue to retain the ability to sort of critically question the information provided to you. So this A/B testing showed that the half of the students that were given this metacognitive prompts actually had better learning outcomes. So even user interface wise, we can do much more to support learning and to reduce the kind of addiction problems that I've mentioned. In terms of multilinguality and supporting things beyond English or beyond global North languages, there are also better things coming out. So ChatGPT voice is terrible with Bengali. It defaults to, well, first of all, it's quite wrong most of the time. And even when it is right, it uses the Bangladeshi Bengali accent. And even I've told it, like, don't use this dialect. Kolkata does not use that. It doesn't. Sarvam AI is, they were big at the AI summit. They launched a bunch of different products, not just an LLM, but also stuff beyond it. And they're all very well supported in Indian languages. So open source and this type of like community empowerment is actually leading to more of this work that I'd like to see in the world. Um, and as a starting point, I see a few different pathways beyond the chatbot. So I would love for AI to become infrastructure, not interlocutor, meaning that it would be great for people to use AI in different parts of their life, but it should not be like a mechanism that you interact with by talking to it, or rather it becomes like other tools, like a calculator, that a thing that shows its steps beyond the primary user interface. Um, Skill sustaining systems. So it should not, AI chatbots should not be designed in a way that replaces entry level pathways to jobs en masse, but instead remains as a tool that helps people. Instead of producing, like you mentioned, Harsha, producing half baked things that then people at senior levels have to support, and that causes cognitive burden for them as well. I would love to see more modular and interoperable architecture. So instead of everything being run through a general purpose system, what if we started building single purpose systems again that are more tractable and can be fixed easily as like one part of the architecture? Um, Interaction modalities beyond natural language, including but not limited to like yes to audio, video, images, but also the physical world like robotics. And finally, I would love to see institutional safeguards. So, I mean, I'm not getting too much into this because I think it's a wide area, but I would like to see more policy involvement in sort of redirecting this type of development workflow towards one paradigm. There's a few different startups that have started up recently that are trying to build a different future. Adaption Labs by Sarah Hooper, she specifically talks about adaptive interfaces, which I'm really excited to see what comes out. I have actually sent her this paper, so I'm curious to know what they think. Another lab called Humans and came up. They're also trying to build collaboration tools. Um, that a lot of new open source companies and startups are saying they want to empower the user again to build their own tools beyond chatbots and do specific interesting things. Finally, in terms of clothes folding robots, Irene sent me the link of this company called Loom Robotics, based out of San Francisco. So robots don't have to be humanoid. I think humanoid form is actually one of the least versatile forms to do the kind of tasks that robots can do. So I really love this concept. It's like two lamps that sit next to your bed and usually look like lamps during the day or when it's not being used. But then if you dump clothes on it, it comes out with claws and folds your clothes. It's actually currently available for pre-order. And I love that it like syncs into your existing workflow into your household without it being yet another thing that you have to sort of be responsible for and takes up space. Um, we have open source robotics, so we are trying to empower the end user by giving them new modalities. So these are two types of robots that are available from Hugging Face that you yourself can program. There's open source libraries. The library paper just got the Lerobo library that empowers these two got published as a paper at ICLR. So I invite everyone to check that. And I'm hoping that people move beyond chatbots very soon. So in conclusion, I don't think personally I'm willing to die on this hill. We don't need AI to talk to us all the time, and specifically not for certain use cases. But we instead need to shape UXs that help us think, work, care, tools that we can inspect, contest, and control. AI will shape and is shaping human activities, but what forms it takes and under what conditions is still ours to decide. So we should seize this chance and build an alternative future. Thank you.